The Washington Commanders lose again and lose in the worst possible way. A lopsided home loss to the lifeless and purposeless Cleveland Browns. And they go from having total control over their playoff future to complete elimination, annihilation, group therapy time here on Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in, Commanders fans, to the Locked On Commanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, free and available on all platforms, including YouTube and the WUSA 9 Plus app on your Roku or your Amazon Fire Stick. And we thank you for making us your first listen or your first view of the day, especially, and as always, live after these games. Sometimes, unfortunately, more often than not going the way that we want them to go. But I'm David Harrison. My co-host sitting next to me is Chris the Rooster Russell, both of us credentialed members of the media covering your Commanders. Chris is doing it for Team 980, where you can find he and Pete Medhurst live 9 a.m. to noon Eastern, Monday through Friday, or anytime on the Odyssey app. And you can find me writing about your Commanders at Commander Country, a part of Sports Illustrated's FanNation.
All right, David. Yes, indeed. You are correct on all of that. And we're going to be more right than just about anybody. But this episode of Locked On Commanders is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM? Hey, there might be a spot available. And managing your own football franchise? Well, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps in the game. And yes, there might be a franchise available for you to take over because it is a full-scale disaster. The big story on this edition is the Commanders, David, not only lose at home to the lifeless Cleveland Browns, as you described in our little opening intro, a 6-win team coming in, eliminated from playoff contention, playing for nothing. And now, not only do they hammer the Washington Commanders, pulling away in the second half, winning 24-10, but they eliminate the Commanders by virtue of the Detroit Lions win against the Chicago Bears, and then the Green Bay Packer win over the Minnesota Vikings. So that's obviously where we start. And David, real quickly, before we get into our big plays of the game, if you would have told me this a week ago, if you would have told me this earlier this week, I would have been, that scenario is not going to happen. They're going to play for something at least next week against the Cowboys. And now it's a completely meaningless game for the Washington Commanders.
Yeah, it's completely meaningless for Washington. It means a whole lot for Dallas.
Exactly.
And I mean, I suppose there's something to be said about keeping Dallas from getting the division. I mean, you're not keeping them out of the playoffs. I mean, seeding, okay, got it, but they're going to play. Well, I guess the number one seed is up for grabs too. So, I mean, there's, whatever. I mean, maybe somebody cares about that. I don't think the players in the locker room honestly care about that as much as some people might. But that, to me, that's not a reason to go out there. That's not motivation, right? But that's the situation the Cleveland Browns were in. The Cleveland Browns came in with nothing to play for. I mean, other than maybe Amari Cooper wanting to remind Washington that he is that dude, nobody else on the field really had too much of a care. And Chris, I said it on the final episode last week. I said it on the crossover. I said it on the radio. Like, that was kind of my mindset. I was like, this Cleveland Browns team really doesn't have a whole lot of reason to come in here and give a whole lot of fight to the Washington Commanders. So the only way the Commanders lose this game is if the Commanders lose this game. That's exactly what happened. The Commanders lost. I mean, even in warm-ups, Chris, I was watching the two teams. I was watching the Cleveland Browns. And I mean, at one point in time, there was such a gaggle of players surrounding like where Deshaun Watson was throwing that you couldn't really even see that he was the one throwing the ball. And I mean, this isn't like they're huddled up talking. Like, these are just dudes hanging out on a football field. Like, even going through pregame warmups, the Browns are just kind of like going through and they're like, all right, cool. Like, hey, did you book your tickets? Hey, did you book your flight? Hey, where are you going to be this winter? Like, and then you look at the game. They go through, right? They get an early field goal thanks to the interception, right? The defense stands up, doesn't let them in the end zone, and they get a field goal. And then they get down again, and they decide they have 3 points in their pocket, and they decide, you know what? Why not? Let's go for a touchdown. What do we got to lose, right? Nothing. And when they don't get the conversion, you don't see like a team really react to it and go, oh man, like we need to get that back. And we need to come back and fight back. Like other than, okay. And you know what? The one I forgot about was Denzel Ward going up against Ohio State teammate Terry McLaurin. Like he wanted to go out there and show Terry like, hey man, this ain't practice no more. And in a friendly battle way. Right. So there were two guys maybe on the field that had something to fight for. If the Washington Commanders go out and they put 14, 17 points up on the board in the first half, the Cleveland Browns basically come out ready to just kind of, okay, let's just get this over with. And let's do the same. But the Commanders allow the Cleveland Browns to hang around, not only allow them, but then hand them, gift wrap them opportunities to come in. And look, these dudes are still competitors, right? So when I talk about these reasons to compete, I'm talking about extra reasons, right? Every football player is a competitor. They want to win. So don't get it twisted. I'm not saying the Browns came in and said, we could lose this game and not care. I'm just saying they didn't have that added bonus juice coming into this game. And the Washington Commanders essentially just left them to hang around and even gave them, like I said, gifted them opportunities that they didn't need to have and need to give them. And the Cleveland Browns said, well, thank you. We'll go ahead and we'll take that. We're NFL players just like you. And we'll send you, to your off season. And now, the Commanders can book their vacation plans as well.
Some of the things you just brought up there from a long game, obviously you kind of forget about in the first quarter and a half, but you're right. They took points off the board. The Commanders stopped them on fourth down. You thought with a long scoring drive at the end of the first half, the Commanders were in decent shape, lead at halftime, finally maybe get over some of the yips. And then it was basically, and quite honestly, like a completely different team in the second, like all the momentum you built on a 21-play, 96-yard drive to end the first half just completely went away over 12 minutes of halftime. And that leads us into our turning point and our big play of the game. And for me, David, it's going to be the Amari Cooper 46-yard touchdown pass from Deshaun Watson. And make no mistake about it, this wasn't anything Deshaun Watson did other than distribute the football on an easy pass to the sideline. This is everything about Amari Cooper turning, spinning, breaking a tackle by Kendall Fuller and running the rest of the way. And what an absolutely awful job by Kendall Fuller. And I guess he was a little bit annoyed at the media afterwards from what I heard. That people were asking him about missing a tackle. Listen, Kendall, stop. Enough. You played pretty well the last 9-10 games. Fine. You were wretched the first 5-6 games of the year. You were awful. Yeah. You cannot miss that tackle in that spot. That gave the Browns the lead at 10-7, a lead they would never relinquish. And it was on like Donkey Kong from that point on. And, you could name all the hogs and mascots you want. Here's what I would say. This performance.
Oh, man.
This performance wasn't about the hogs, David. This was about a pig rolling around in slop, and the pig was the Washington Commanders on Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, that's pretty good. If mine weren't out of reach, out of frame, I would join you there.
I might do the rest of the show with my pig snout here.
I don't know that our sponsors would appreciate that. No, you're absolutely right. That was the turning point. But look, I'm going to go even a step prior to that. I'm going to go with a 3-and-out coming out of halftime. So you talk about the 22 play drive, 11 and a half minutes off the clock. You end up with a touchdown. All those things you kind of make up a little bit for some of those earlier mistakes and opportunities you gave to the Cleveland Browns. And yes, Joseph, we always acknowledge all of you. We've been throwing all your comments up on the screen. Thank you to everybody joining us in the live chat. Joseph,
Joe's a little
everybody else,
aggressive.
Patrick, Keith, Kevin,
his Twitter for breaking news.
We appreciate all of you. Look, I said this to Linnell on 106.7 right before the game, that the advantage, the spark that Ron Rivera was looking for, right, was essentially the fact that we haven't seen Carson Wentz in a long time. Specifically, we haven't seen Carson Wentz in this kind of newly adapted offense that he's developed with Taylor Heinicke. So there are going to be some new wrinkles. So the Cleveland Browns are going to have tape on Taylor in this new offense with Brian Robinson and everything else, Carson in the old offense, but they wouldn't have any tape of Carson in this offense. That's where the advantage was going to come in. That advantage had an expiration date and a clock on it. That's what I told Linnell. And that was the first half. And after the first half, the Cleveland Browns now know what you're doing, and they have time to adjust. If you heard Amari Cooper talk after after the game, he said, we went into the locker room, we made some adjustments, we came out, we made plays, we won the game. It's really that simple. The Washington Commanders' opportunity to seize this game was in the first half, and they gave it away. They squandered it. The Cleveland Browns were ripe for the picking, and the Washington Commanders, to quote the great Dennis Green, let them off the hook. To me, that is the turning point, is halftime, because when they came out of the locker room, you go from a 20-plus play drive to a 3-and-out. And that was the moment I said, the Cleveland Browns have made adjustments, and now this is where the best coaches get separated from the average coaches. The game plans are great. It's all about the adjustments. Who comes out of halftime with a better adjusted plan? The Cleveland Browns came out with adjustments. The Washington Commanders came out with doo-doo, like flat out doo-doo. And Chris, before we get to our stock report, because I know we've got a lot more about this game to talk about that's not necessarily between the sidelines, decisions, fan reactions. We've got a whole bunch of stuff to talk about as the week goes on. But I want to say something before we talk to Ron tomorrow and before we record our next episode. Ron Rivera has a very tough decision to make on which quarterback's going to start this final game of the season. Carson Wentz, Taylor Heinicke, Sam Howell, Jake Fromm. You know what I'm saying? There's only way Ron Rivera comes out of this thing looking right, because if he throws Taylor Heinicke in there and Heinicke beats the Cowboys, oh, buddy, are you going to pay for that? If you put Howell in there, same thing. If you put Fromm in there and win, same thing. If you put Sam Howell and Fromm in there, everybody's basically, okay, you're waving the white flag, preparing for next season, and then that's not good. If you put Carson Wentz in there and he beats the Cowboys, you're still not going to win, but at least then you can pound your chest a little bit at the end of that game and say, see, Carson was the right decision. It was just a bad game. And I'm worried that's the decision he's going to make for that exact reason.
Well, there's a lot to unpack there, and I would say I'm going to need a little more time than we have on this particular post-game episode to really get into that. So I'll save my response for our next episode, because I do think it's an interesting dilemma now that they've been officially eliminated, and really there's only one answer to me. I'll give that on the next episode just as a little tease, to stay with us. But first, as David mentioned, we're going to get to our stock report. Who's up, who's down after another dark day at the office to close out unofficially the year. But guys, this podcast is sponsored by Ultimate Football GM. You know, I'm fired up about our new partner and sponsor of today's episode, the mobile game, Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed about becoming an NFL GM, hey, maybe you can replace Ron Rivera. You might know that the fans are a little bit frustrated. You want to manage your own football franchise? You want to dream big? You want to trade players, make draft picks, hire the right coaches, fire Scott Turner, hire a new inventive offensive coordinator? That's what you want to do. Well, you can do all this with Ultimate Football GM. Navigate your franchise through free agency, the draft, all the ups and downs and trials and tribulations of a season. On Commanders listeners can get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in all caps. That's Locked On in the game store. Again, Locked On in all caps. Make sure you check it out today. Download the game. Just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up in the app stores. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM. All right, thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and or view of the day. Now subscribe to the Locked On NFL podcast and get daily conversations on the biggest NFL stories, plus in-depth analysis on the biggest games with NFL key predictions every Friday and Monday. Local insiders cover the weekend with game-to-game episodes. Locked On NFL, available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. All right, so David, we, after every game we do this, win or lose, so we kind of take a look and maybe take the temperature of now a team that, again, is going to play for nothing but pride this upcoming weekend against the Dallas Cowboys. Again, you mentioned some of the stakes at hand for the Cowboys. It means something for them. It means nothing but professional pride for the Washington Commanders. But you have to play out the string. And Sunday was obviously a very disappointing performance, but that doesn't mean everyone stunk. That doesn't mean nobody performed well. And for me, stock up is simple. Daron Payne. He had 2 more sacks, 5 tackles. Some of this without a good deal of it without Jonathan Allen as his tag team partner, because Allen was knocked out of the game with a knee injury in the second quarter. And this Sunday, or week 17, with 11.5 sacks going into a free agent year for an interior defensive lineman, that is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, that's amazing. And his stock has been climbing really since training camp and preseason. I mean, his stock has been steadily climbing, and that's exactly why he's going to get a franchise tag and prove to them he can do it more than 1 year. But look, he got the 1 sack and he kind of went out there and he did the thing. And now some people say he's like writing, Deshaun's name in his notebook. I wonder if he's telling the Commanders sign that check.
Well, yeah, that's what I think he's doing.
I'm going to ask him. I'm going to ask him that question once tempers and
I'm
moods
getting
are
paid.
different.
He's not worried about Deshaun Watson in his diary. This isn't Deshaun's diary.
That's
no,
what
this is I'm getting paid, son.
Absolutely. So yeah, absolutely agree. Daron Payne, absolute beast. My stock up, and again, we're not going to get too deep into this conversation because we've got another episode tomorrow. We've got more episodes coming. We're going to dive into all the facets of this game, from coach decision-making, quarterback decision-making, again, fan reactions, and the future. Obviously, we hear from Ron Rivera on Monday and I don't expect he's going to name a starter tomorrow, but we'll get maybe a little bit more insight into kind of what he's thinking right now. And Chris will tell you the one answer for the starting quarterback. I'm very interested to find out what this answer is. I don't know, and Chris isn't going to tell me before I hear it on our show. If you guys have your opinions on who the starting quarterback should be and why, drop them into the Locked On Commanders Twitter DMs or into the emails. I would love to read some of those live on the air when we have this conversation on our next episode. So make sure you come back for that and contribute. My stock up is Taylor Heinicke. And I'm going to say this kind of shortly because, again, I want to save it for the full conversation. But Heinicke. Listen, Carson Wentz is a human being. And from everything I've seen, all the interactions I've had with him and seen his teammates interact, he seems like a good dude, okay? But there's a part of this that's kind of dehumanized because it's between the lines. And I want to make sure that we kind of stay there and understand that, from the human being standpoint, I don't want to get too deep in this, but look, Taylor Heinicke ran off the field and he was cheered and the fans were cheering for him. And Chris, you retweeted the video. I took a video from the press boxes. I was like, I want to see what this reaction is going to be. As Carson ran off the field, he was booed by the remaining FedEx Field fans. Now, look, there was a closer video that somebody shared on Twitter as well. And there were some people mixed in the fans, who were kind of like, keep your head up. Hey, Carson, another game or whatever. So it's not all negative, but there's a very rabid reaction to what happened on Sunday. And I think it's going to bleed into the future. So for that reason, the Heinicke hive, again, buzzing very loudly. Taylor Heinicke stock up.
Yeah, I'm going to go for my stock down, and this is obviously going to, again, take more time than we have on this one episode to unpack fully, but Ron Rivera. Everything that Ron Rivera and the Washington Commanders, for the most part, have touched over the last month, David, has turned to, quite honestly, poop.
Doo-doo.
I mean, it's just all there is to it, right? From every quarterback, from the quarterback change to fourth down decisions to not giving Brian Robinson the ball on the last 4 fourth down opportunities to being in a position of 6th spot in the in the NFC playoff picture to being eliminated, not in week 18 and game 17. No. In week 17 and game 16. Again, just a couple of weeks ago, they were in the 6th spot of the NFC playoff picture, and now they play for nothing this upcoming weekend against the Dallas Cowboys. Everything that Ron did, his leadership, his, again, like the players, coach, like all the stuff that the culture, all the stuff that people love about Ron, it wasn't good enough. It wasn't good enough to overcome all of the other mistakes, bad decisions, and bad execution. So for me, stock down starts at the top with the guy in charge of football operations, Ron Rivera.
Yeah, it's got to be, and that's unfortunate. But again, part of the conversation that we would get into moving into the rest of the week, we'll flesh all of that fully out. Joseph wants to know who the quarterback is going to be next week. And again, we will talk about that on our next episode. So Joseph, make sure you come through Monday evening on YouTube, Tuesday morning for audio, if you prefer it that way. We will discuss that, and we will each name who we think should be the starting quarterback for the Washington Commanders against Dallas Cowboys. My stock down is going to be Derek Forrest. I love Derek, and I think overall his stock is still up. But he was exposed a little bit in this game. There was a couple of really bad zone coverages by Derek, and one of the touchdowns, he was kind of the guy that was supposed to be in that zone, wasn't really there. Took a bad angle. It was just an all around bad day. I don't know what PFF's grades are going to be for him because those are always kind of tricky. But when you see a clear zone and you see one guy in an area with a wide open wide receiver, it's pretty clear to you who that guy is supposed to be covered, who's supposed to be covered by that guy. Derek Forrest, definitely not his strongest performance. Again, overall, stock's still up for the year, but definitely after this game, stock is a little bit down. And Chris, we do have some game balls, but Joseph wants to know how you and your kids are doing. So I figure go ahead and let Joseph know before we move into our final segment here.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate it. I remember, Joe, kids are doing great. Just got back from Cleveland. Ironically enough, they were not too excited about this game on 92.3 The Fan in Cleveland. Believe it or not, they weren't giving their Brownies much of a chance. But you know what? The Browns took care of business when they didn't have anything to play for at all. Real quickly, Kevin Wools says he loves Sam Howell. I was stoked when the Commanders drafted him last year. Loved him in college at UNC. Listen, just to give you a little look ahead, I think this is going to be a decision that Ron has to make with an eye towards the future in terms of who is definitely going to be on the roster next year. And obviously, Sam Howell is the only one that we can think of that will definitely be on the roster next year. All right, coming up, we will, again, give out our game balls as we wrap up this particular live episode of the Locked On Commanders podcast, the immediate aftermath of a disaster for the Washington Commanders. But you know what's not a disaster? That is when our friends at Built Bar are with us, because this episode of Locked On Commanders is presented by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat to wallow in your misery, but you don't want all the fat and the calories, then you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays, guys, and of course, everyone's goal, my goal, everyone's goal for the most part is to eat healthier, but eat better. You don't want to compromise taste. Well, if you want to do that, you've got to try Built Bar. Healthy, tasty, they're delicious for you, perfect in terms of low in sugar, low in calories, low in net carbs, or I should say, low in net carbs, and also high in protein. They have delicious flavors like peanut butter brownie, coconut almond, churro, so many different flavors, and you can get them all. You can get the variety boxes. And now the great news, guys, not only can you get them at built.com, but also you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Everybody's got one of those within driving distance. Go to your nearest Walmart, walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. I saw them in there the other day, right after Christmas. They are ready and able to be bought now at Walmart or Sam Club. Pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Get in now and grab a 13-bar box of our hit flavors at Built Bar and BuiltBar.com.
All right, guys, we're going to wrap up this conversation today. We are going to give out some game balls again. The game did not go well. The Washington Commanders losing at home to the Cleveland Browns and then ultimately eventually being eliminated from playoff contention. So here very shortly, it's going to be draft season. Guys, we appreciate everybody joining us here on the live and in the live chat. And we also appreciate, of course, as always, those of you listening later on in the audio version or watching on YouTube after this thing has been published. Some comments here from Teddy and from Slammin' about the coaching and about Ron Rivera. Again, parts of the conversations along with quarterbacks and even fan reactions that we will get into in our coming episodes this week, starting next week. We're trying to focus on the game as much as we can, just because the game does deserve that attention. So we will get into the rest of it starting tomorrow, and we will hear from Ron Rivera Monday before we record. So we'll have some more insight from the man in question, assuming he's not fired tonight, which I don't think he's going to be, Chris. I'm sure that you agree.
I don't think. Listen, I don't think he's going to get fired, but I will say this: I'm a high-level person in the organization on my way out of FedEx Field, and there'll be some sort of changes. I just don't know exact, and that's what this person told me. The
Fans are
question
not,
is what exact changes?
yeah,
It's not going to be Ron Rivera tonight or anytime soon. I can tell you that.
right. Fans, you're not the only ones upset. Trust us. There's a lot of upset people. David Bada is probably also upset, but also it was a good night for him as well.
It was first NFL game. I mean, this guy's been around, I think, since Ron's first year on the International Pathway Program. And he's just been grinding practice squad. They've had exemptions for him, so that's given them extra time. And now he finally breaks free. And I guess his family came over from overseas because they said, "Oh, this first NFL game." I mean, unfortunately, it didn't work out the way you would like, but I'm sure for the family, it was a thrill, a dream. For Bada, certainly an opportunity that he's never going to forget. And you know what? Sometimes for certain individuals, there are other things besides wins and losses, and this would be one of them. So I thought it would be appropriate to give him a little tip of the cap for finally getting over that hurdle and getting an opportunity.
Absolutely, absolutely. So certainly deserving of a game ball there. Congratulations to David and his family. I mean, again, you want to get the win on top of it, but look, simply being active and playing in an NFL game is an achievement all by itself. So congratulations to him. Second game ball is going to Danny Johnson. Look, we've acknowledged and discussed at length on this show about how valuable depth is. We've seen that depth on the offensive line tested. We've seen the depth on the running back group tested. The quarterback depth chart certainly has been tested. But that secondary, Cam Curl was missing in San Francisco, missing again against Cleveland. Benjamin St-Juste out for another game. Derek Forrest is young still. Kendall Fuller, the veteran, he's about the only veteran that's been on the field. Christian Holmes took some bumps, stuff like that. But Danny Johnson is another guy who's been stepping up, getting more reps because of some of these injuries. And overall, again, don't know what his PFF grade is going to be, but he made some very solid plays. And the press box announcer was very excited to announce some of those plays that he made during the course of the game.
Wow, he was excited to announce a lot of things in the press box. But anyway,
Yeah.
I thought Danny Johnson, I know he had at least the one pass breakup. I thought he had two. Maybe I'm wrong on that. Either way, this is a guy who struggled in August, People might not remember the big play he gave up in the Baltimore preseason game, which I think lost and cost him a roster spot. Because remember, they went all the way down to four corners and they cut him and Danny and Cornelder. And people were like, what are they doing? And Danny Johnson obviously came back from the practice squad and he has made some impact plays. He's shown to be able to play inside and outside. And as you mentioned, with the injury to Benjamin St-Juste, he's had to play more outside. And, I would say he's at least, you would think, a valuable piece moving forward, however they decide to do things. Of course, you have to kind of figure out whether Benjamin St-Juste can ever fully live up to his potential that we know we've seen, because he's had trouble staying on the field. So a guy like Danny Johnson, who has that versatility, David, I think is, certainly a very important piece moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think he's definitely proven some value here. Kevin asked why De'Ami Brown didn't play much. So they don't have the snap counts right in front of me. I know Cam Sims ended up getting a target and a catch, but I think, honestly, guys, I think it has more to do with, one, Carson Wentz's comfortability with players. Two, the quick nature of this offense. De'Ami is just not the quick route type of guy. He's more of I don't want to say long developing, but he's a little bit longer than maybe a quick drag or something like that. Logan Thomas, John Dodson, Terry McLaurin, and Curtis Samuel, those four guys alone account for over 20 targets, and Carson Wentz only threw the ball 28 times. So I think that kind of shows you why De'Ami Brown wasn't getting used very much. That tight end connection is something that Carson's been known to lean on heavily. Logan Thomas tied for the team league in targets. So good question there, but I think that's really what it boils down to, Chris, unless you have another aspect.
I think people just remember what happened in week 4-5 against Tennessee, the two long touchdowns, including the 75-yarder. And that's why that comes up. Just because he did that in that game, again, they had less of a pass rush than Cleveland with Myles Garrett, Jadeveon Clowney, and the other kid that got a sack that beat Charles Leno on kind of a stunt twist. From the right defensive end spot. I forgot his name, 69. So again, I think that's part of it. Just because something happens in one game doesn't mean it's going to happen in every game. And David, the number one star, and again, the number one game ball, I should say, in the 3 stars methodology that we use is Daron Payne, who we talked about earlier in the show. Again, when you have 11 and a half sacks, defense again allowed too many big plays, but the defense only allowed 3 points in the first half. Only allowed 3 points in the first half. It was when the offense had no answers in the third quarter that the defense fell apart. And again, we've talked about the Kendall Fuller play, the Derek Forrest touchdown allowed. You know what? Daron Payne, as hard as I've been on him in his career, David, he came to play this year and he has cranked it up. And whatever he was writing, whatever that symbol was, to me, that was with a lot of zeros, because that's the amount of money that he's going to make if somebody gives him a free agent contract. Now, the problem is the Washington Commanders are likely to franchise tag him to prevent that from happening. Hey, listen, he's going to make a lot of money one way or the other.
Yes, he is. He's already a fairly, he's got some. I'm not trying to get into his pockets too much, but his bank account is healthy. It's about to get a little bit healthier. Matthew, good point on your comment there, saying it looked like Scott Turner was scared to let Carson Wentz throw the ball. That is going to factor in our conversation tomorrow. So make sure you come back for that conversation. But Chris, before we get out of here, just want to wish all of our listeners, viewers, all of you guys, Happy New Year. Hopefully your holidays have been good, solid to you, and hopefully everybody's happy and healthy. Chris, I feel like I haven't talked to you in like a year. I know it's been till last year, but I feel like it's been a legit year because of last week, and we were kind of back and forth, and everybody's doing everything. But we're back now, just in time to start getting ready for draft season.
Yep, we work separate, and unfortunately, we don't have a playoff team to look forward to and cover, or a big Week 18 game. That's the breaks, guys. And again, I know we've said we'll talk more about this. But like David said, we wanted to focus as much on the game. I know you guys all want to know who's going to be the starting quarterback in week 1 of 2023. Again, we have all offseason to deal with all of these questions, and we don't even have all the answers. So just hang tight. Be with us. We will have continuous episodes, obviously, not only the upcoming week, but as we go through the offseason, and there will be a lot of questions. Quite honestly, I don't know how many answers, but thanks again for everybody. We see you all. Can't get to everybody, but keep on coming back. We appreciate you, and we will try and give everybody some love. But thanks again for making the Locked On Commanders podcast your first listen and watch of the day. Again, make your second listen and watch the Locked On NFL podcast, Locked On NFL. It's available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get aboard with us, Locked On Washington Commanders at gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter or DM at LO Commanders. You know the deal. For David Harrison, covering the Washington Commanders for SI.com's FanNation and Commander Country, I'm Chris Russell. Yes, I'm the guy wearing, though it doesn't fit well on my face. It was kind of emblematic of the Washington Commanders. If you're out and about, please be safe, be kind to one another, and thank you for joining us right here on the Locked On Commanders podcast.